Stop. Before you scroll past this video, I need you to look at what you are seeing right now. This is Moscow. This is a completely normal Tuesday morning in one of the largest cities on the planet. These are real people going to real jobs, carrying real worries about real things that matter to them. The woman with the bag is thinking about her mother who called last night and said she was not feeling well. The man in the black coat is running through a presentation in his head that he has to give in 2 hours and is not sure about the third slide. The teenager with the headphones is listening to a song that reminds her of someone, and she is not sure how she feels about that yet. None of them are thinking about geopolitics. None of them are thinking about what America thinks of Russia. None of them are symbols of anything. They are people. Completely, entirely, without qualification, people. And the Russia that exists in most American heads right now, the Russia of gray streets and serious faces and monolithic threat, has almost nothing to do with what you are actually looking at. I was born here. I have lived here my entire life. I ride these streets every single day on my bicycle through every season in every kind of weather, and I know this city the way you only know a place when it is yours. Today, I am going to show you 10 things about Russia and Russians that will change how you see what you are watching right now. Not 10 political things, not 10 historical things, 10 human things. The kind of things that do not make the news because they are not dramatic enough for news, but that are more true about this place than almost anything you have ever been told. Stay until the end, because the last thing I am going to say is the thing I most want you to remember. And I think you will. Number 1. The faces and what they actually mean. The first thing every American notices when they arrive in Moscow is that nobody is smiling. Not the cashier at the shop. Not the person waiting for the metro. Not the couple walking together in the park. Nobody. In American culture, this registers immediately as something wrong. As coldness or hostility or depression or some combination of all three. Let me explain exactly what is happening instead, because the explanation changes everything. Russian culture draws a distinction between public space and private space that is sharper and more consequential than anything in American culture. In public space, you are among strangers. Strangers are people you do not know. People you do not know have not given you any reason to trust them, to open yourself to them, to share anything of yourself with them. So in public, you are neutral. You are present, but contained. You move through the shared space of the city efficiently and without imposing on the people around you and without inviting them to impose on you. You do not perform warmth you do not feel. You do not smile at people who have not given you a reason to smile at them. This is not rudeness. This is a form of respect. A respect for the reality that strangers are strangers and that pretending otherwise is a small dishonesty that the culture finds unnecessary. Now here is the other half of this picture, and it is the half that most Americans never see because they encounter Russia only in public. When you move from public space into private space, when you cross the threshold into someone's home, when you sit at their table, when through some process of time and shared experience you become a person that they have decided to care about, the face that was neutral in public is completely gone. What replaces it is something so different that people who have experienced both find it almost impossible to reconcile. The warmth that Russians give to people they actually know and actually trust is not the performed warmth of American public culture where smiling at strangers is a social requirement. It is the warmth of people who do not give it to everyone and therefore mean it completely when they give it to you. I have sat in kitchens in this city and felt more genuinely welcomed, more completely seen, more entirely at home than I have felt anywhere on earth. That welcome was not easy to earn. It was given by people who do not give it easily, and that is exactly why it meant so much. When an American smiles at you on the street, it might mean anything or nothing. When a Russian smiles at you, it means you have become something to them. It means you are inside the circle. And inside the circle is a completely different country. Number 2. The education and what it produces in people. Russia is a country that takes education seriously in a way that is structural and cultural and goes much deeper than policy or statistics. The Russian word intelligent, pronounced with the stress on the last syllable, does not translate directly into English. It means something between educated and cultured and the kind of person who moves through the world with genuine knowledge and genuine taste and genuine engagement with ideas. Being an intelligent in Russian culture is not just a description of someone's educational background. It is a moral aspiration, a category of personhood that the culture actively encourages people to try to reach. The result of this cultural value is visible everywhere in daily life if you are paying attention. On the metro, people read books, not phones, not tablets. Books with pages and spines and the particular smell of paper that tells you the book is real and has been touched by other hands before yours. People read on the way to work and on the way home and during their lunch breaks, and these are not people performing literacy for anyone. They are people for whom reading is simply what you do with time that is otherwise unoccupied. In conversation, educated Russians move between subjects with a fluency that reflects genuine knowledge. A person who works in finance can discuss the poetry of Akhmatova. A person who works in medicine can explain the history of the Byzantine Empire. A person who has spent their career as an engineer can quote Bulgakov from memory and tell you why the passage they are quoting says something precise about the situation you are currently in. This breadth of reference is not accidental. It is the product of an education system that believed, and still largely believes, that knowing many things is better than knowing one thing well. That the person who can move between disciplines, who can bring a literary perspective to a scientific problem, or a historical perspective to a contemporary situation, is a more capable and more interesting person than one who cannot. I find this one of the most attractive things about living here. The sense that ideas are taken seriously, that a conversation can go anywhere, and that the person you are talking to has probably read more than you and is not going to pretend otherwise. That when someone reaches for a quote or a reference, it is because the quote or the reference actually says something that ordinary language does not say as well, and they know it and you know it, and that shared knowledge is a form of intimacy that I have found almost nowhere else. Number 3. The food and the truth about it. Russian food has a reputation outside Russia that ranges from mediocre to actively bad, and this reputation is wrong, and it matters that it is wrong because it has kept too many people from one of the genuine and underappreciated pleasures that this country offers. The reputation comes entirely from Soviet food. Soviet food was genuinely bad. This is not a controversial claim. The Soviet system prioritized quantity over quality, sufficiency over pleasure, feeding people over feeding people well. The result was a food culture that was gray and functional in exactly the way the cliché suggests. Canteens serving the same things in the same portions with the same gray light overhead. Shops with limited variety and limited freshness and limited everything except the particular bleakness of spaces where pleasure has been systematically removed from a human need that is supposed to be one of life's reliable satisfactions. But Soviet food was not Russian food. Russian food is what existed before the Soviet Union arrived in 1917, and what has been slowly and powerfully reasserting itself in the decades since the Soviet Union ended in 1991. Real Russian food is the food that Russian grandmothers make in kitchens exactly like the ones in the buildings on this street. It is borscht made properly, with the right beets at the right moment of the year, with the right proportions of cabbage and carrot and potato and the right amount of time on the stove. Served with a spoonful of smetana, which is a sour cream that is richer and more complex than anything that gets sold under that name outside this country. Borscht done this way is one of the greatest things a human being can eat. I say this without reservation or embarrassment. It is extraordinary. Pelmeni are small dumplings filled with a mixture of pork and beef and onion, made by hand. The dough rolled thin and cut into circles and folded over the filling with the edges pressed together in a way that requires practice and produces a result that is entirely different from factory-made pelmeni, in the same way that homemade pasta is entirely different from dried pasta from a box. Pelmeni made properly and served with smetana and a small amount of butter and black pepper are better than almost any pasta dish I have encountered anywhere in the world. I will defend this claim. Syrniki are cottage cheese pancakes. The name sounds less appealing than they are. They are made by combining tvorog, which is a fresh cheese with a slightly grainy texture and a mild flavor, with egg and flour and a small amount of sugar, forming small round cakes and frying them in butter until they are golden on the outside and soft and warm on the inside, and serving them with smetana and jam. Serniki for breakfast are the correct breakfast, and I cannot explain why this has not spread beyond the borders of Russia, except that the world is full of things that should be more widely known than they are. Black bread. Real Russian black bread made with rye flour and a sourdough fermentation that takes days and produces a dense, slightly sour, deeply flavorful bread that is nothing like what gets sold as rye bread in Western countries. Black bread changes how you think about bread once you have eaten the real thing. You understand that bread can be substantial, that bread can be its own thing rather than a delivery mechanism for something else, that a piece of bread with butter and salt can be a complete experience rather than a prelude to one. Pickled vegetables. Mushroom soup made with dried mushrooms that were picked in a forest and dried at a dacha, and carry with them something of where they came from. Pirozhki, which are small baked or fried pastries filled with meat or cabbage or egg and onion or jam, and which are sold everywhere and eaten everywhere, and which are one of those foods that are so present in a culture that they become invisible to the people who grew up with them and extraordinary to anyone encountering them for the first time. The food is here. It has always been here. The Soviet period put a gray lid over it, and the lid is off now. You just have to know where to look and who to ask. Number 4. The hospitality and what it actually looks like. This is the thing that surprises visiting Americans most completely and most consistently. The public coldness is real. I have explained it. But the private warmth is equally real and equally consistent, and when you encounter it for the first time after expecting coldness, the contrast is so sharp that some people find it genuinely disorienting. A Russian host will not let you leave their home hungry. This is not a polite expression. It is a commitment that operates independently of circumstances. The table will have more food on it than can reasonably be consumed by the number of people sitting at it. This is intentional. The abundance is the point. The abundance says you are welcome here, you are cared for here, there is more than enough, and all of it is for you. When the first dishes are finished, more will appear. When you say you cannot eat anything more, you will be offered something different on the grounds that perhaps you are simply tired of what you have been eating rather than actually full. When you try to leave, you will be given things to take with you. Something from the kitchen. Something from the garden if there is a garden. Something that someone made and wants you to have, because sending a guest away empty-handed is a failure of hospitality so basic that it cannot be permitted. I have been fed extraordinary meals in apartments where I could see clearly that the family was not living easily, where the kitchen was small and the furniture was old, and the signs of financial difficulty were visible if you knew how to read them. The food on the table was the best they had, every bit of it, given without calculation and without expectation of anything in return, and with a sincerity that made it one of the most moving experiences of my life. That is not coldness. That is its opposite. That is a generosity that has its roots somewhere much older and much deeper than economics, and that survives poverty and shortage and difficulty in a way that I find genuinely humbling every time I encounter it. Number 5. The humor and why it will surprise you completely. Russians are funny. I need to say this plainly because it contradicts so completely the image of the serious Russian that dominates outside perception of this culture. Russians are genuinely, deeply, surprisingly funny. The humor is dark. This is the first thing to understand about it. Russian humor goes to places that American mainstream humor generally avoids or approaches carefully. It jokes about death, about failure, about the gap between what authority promises and what life actually delivers, about the absurdity of systems that take themselves seriously while producing results that are obviously ridiculous, about the particular comedy of being a human being in a world that is clearly not designed with human beings in mind. This darkness is not nihilism. It is not the humor of people who find suffering entertaining or who have given up on things being better. It is the humor of people who have discovered that laughter is one of the few reliable responses to things that cannot be changed. When you have been through what Russia has been through, when the history of the last 100 years is not something you read about, but something that is present in your family, in your grandparents' stories, in the silences around certain subjects that you learned not to ask about when you were young, you develop either the ability to laugh at darkness or you do not survive the darkness intact. Russians chose laughter. Generation after generation, they chose it as a survival strategy, and it became part of the culture so thoroughly that it is now inseparable from the Russian character. The jokes that circulate in Russian kitchens at midnight would not all survive translation. Some of them require a context that takes years to develop. But the spirit of them, the willingness to find the absurdity in the worst things and to make that absurdity the source of genuine laughter, is something I find not just funny but admirable. It is a form of courage, a refusal to be fully defeated by anything. I have laughed harder in Russian kitchens than almost anywhere else in my life, and I have laughed at things that on paper had no business being funny at all. Number 6. The seasons and what they do to the people who live through them. Moscow has 4 genuine seasons, 4 complete and entirely different states of the world, and living through all of them, year after year, does something to a person that is difficult to describe, but impossible to miss once you understand what you are looking at. The winter is real winter, the kind of cold that has physical presence, that presses against you when you step outside, that requires a relationship. You dress for it. You respect it. You do not pretend it is not there. In exchange for that respect, it gives you things. The beauty of Moscow under snow is a different kind of beauty than Moscow in any other season. The light is different. The sounds are different. The city is quieter, and the quiet is the particular quiet of a place that has accepted something large and is sitting with it. Life moves indoors in winter. Apartments become more important. Kitchens become more important. The conversations that happen in winter kitchens are longer and go deeper than conversations in any other season, because there is nowhere else to be, and the darkness outside makes the light inside feel more significant. The spring arrives with a violence that people in gentler climates never experience. It does not gradually become spring in Moscow. It is winter, and then it is spring, and the transition happens in days. And it is so dramatic and so beautiful that people stop on the street to look at the trees which were bare yesterday and are doing something extraordinary today. The joy that arrives with the spring in Moscow is proportional to the winter that preceded it. It is the joy of people who know exactly what cold is and what it costs, and who are now, finally, warm. Summer is brief and glorious, and Muscovites use every day of it with the urgency of people who understand scarcity. The parks fill up immediately and stay full until midnight. Every outdoor space becomes occupied by people who are making the most of something they know will not last. The autumn. I will say simply that Moscow in autumn is one of the most beautiful things I have ever seen, and leave it at that, because description does not help here. You have to be here for it. The point of all this is that living through 4 genuine seasons produces a relationship with time and with change, and with the temporary nature of all good things that I think is one of the most valuable things this culture gives its people. Everything is known to be temporary. The warmth, the particular light of a summer evening, the moment you are in right now. This knowledge makes people pay attention, makes them present, makes them unwilling to waste what they know will not come back. There is a lesson in that which I think the rest of the world would benefit from learning. Number 7. The dachas and what they represent. Every Russian who can have a dacha has one. A dacha is a small property outside the city. Sometimes a proper house with a garden and a sauna and a porch where you sit in the evenings watching the light change over whatever landscape exists in that direction outside Moscow. Sometimes something much more modest. A plot of land with a small structure on it. A shed that has been slowly improved over decades until it resembles a house. Sometimes almost nothing at all. But the dacha is not primarily a property. The dacha is a concept. The dacha is the place where the city ends and something older begins, where the pace changes completely and the change is physical and immediate. where the air is different, and the sounds are different, and the obligations are different, and the measure of time is different. Where the most important thing happening today might be whether the cucumbers are ready, or whether the raspberry jam has set properly, or whether the wood for the sauna is dry enough. Russians go to their dachas with a seriousness of purpose that I find deeply admirable. They grow things in the ground. They preserve those things for winter in jars that line the shelves of small pantries in specific ways that were established generations ago and have not needed to change because they work. They repair things that are broken using materials that are available and skills that were learned from parents and grandparents who learned them from their parents and grandparents. They sit outside in the evenings around tables that have been in the same place for decades and eat food that came from the ground they are sitting on and talk with the particular ease of people who have nowhere else to be and nothing more important to do and who know this and are grateful for it. The dacha culture has survived everything that Russia has been through. It survived the Soviet period when dachas were assigned by the state rather than owned by individuals. It survived the 90s when maintaining any property outside the city became difficult for many families. It survived the rise of the city as the center of everything that matters. It survived because it answers a need that the city cannot answer. The need to be somewhere that moves at a different speed. Somewhere that connects you to something that was there before you and will be there after you. Somewhere that is yours in a way that a rented apartment or a mortgaged flat can never quite be, because the connection to it runs deeper than legal ownership into the kind of belonging that takes generations to develop. Every person you see on this street probably has somewhere outside this city that they think of as home in a different way than they think of their apartment. That somewhere matters enormously to who they are and how they understand themselves. And it is almost impossible to explain to someone who has never had one. Number 8. The kitchens and what happens in them. I have mentioned kitchens several times, and I want to be specific about why, because the Russian kitchen is not just a room where food is prepared. It is an institution, a space with a specific cultural function that goes back decades, and that has produced some of the most important conversations and some of the deepest human connections that this culture has ever generated. In the Soviet period, the kitchen had a particular significance that is difficult to fully explain to people who did not live through it. The apartment was surveilled. The public space was surveilled. Conversation in living rooms and offices and anywhere that felt official or observed was governed by the requirement to say what you were supposed to say, rather than what you actually thought. The kitchen was different. The kitchen was small and domestic and somehow felt less like a space where the state was paying attention. People talked in kitchens, really talked, about what they actually believed, about the gap between official reality and the reality they lived in every day, about the books they had read that were not officially approved, about the world they wished they lived in, about what was true. The kitchen conversations of the Soviet period produced a culture of honesty and depth and genuine engagement with ideas that survived the end of the Soviet Union and is still present in Russian kitchens today. When Russians invite you into their kitchen, they are inviting you into something specific, something more intimate than a living room and more revealing than almost any other space they could offer you. The best conversations I have ever had happened at kitchen tables in apartments exactly like the ones you can see on this street. Around tables that were slightly too small for the number of people sitting at them, with food that kept appearing from somewhere even after everyone had said there could not possibly be more food, with tea that was made and remade through the evening as the hours passed and nobody looked at the time because the time did not matter, with the particular kind of talk that happens when people who trust each other have nowhere else to be and nothing more important to do than tell each other true things. If you want to understand Russia, find a way into a Russian kitchen and stay long enough for the real conversation to start. Everything that is true about this place happens there. Number 9. The pride and where it comes from. Russians are proud people. This is observable and real, and Americans sometimes read it as nationalism or aggression or a chip on the shoulder about Russia's place in the world. It is none of those things at its root. To understand the pride, you need to understand what it is a response to. The last 100 years of Russian history contain things that would have broken most cultures entirely. The First World War, which ended the Tsarist system, the Revolution, and the Civil War that followed. The collectivization which killed millions of people through famine in the early 1930s. The purges which killed hundreds of thousands more and imprisoned millions and created a climate of fear that shaped every relationship and every conversation for decades. The Second World War, which killed 27 million Soviet citizens, which left almost no family in the entire country without direct loss, which required a mobilization of human effort and human suffering on a scale that is almost impossible to comprehend. The post-war period of rebuilding, the Cold War, the Soviet collapse, the chaos of the 90s. The economic crises, and through all of it, through every single one of these things, the culture continued. People continued. They kept raising children and writing poems and building cities and making food and falling in love and doing all the ordinary things that human life requires. The pride that you see in Russians is not the pride of people who think they are better than everyone else. It is the pride of people who have survived everything and are still here, still existing, still creating, still continuing. If you understood this history not as a list of events, but as the actual experience of actual human beings, as the thing that your great-grandparents lived through and told your grandparents about, and your grandparents told your parents about, and your parents told you about, you would not find the pride difficult to understand. You might find it difficult not to share it. Not as a political statement, as a recognition that the capacity to continue in the face of everything that has tried to stop you is one of the most genuinely impressive things a people can do. And these people have done it, are doing it, every ordinary Tuesday on streets exactly like this one. Number 10. The last thing. The thing I want you to carry with you after this video ends and you go back to whatever you were doing before you started watching. The person who just walked past the camera is a person, not a symbol, not a representative of anything, not evidence for any political argument on any side. A person, with a morning they woke up into and something they were thinking about before they were fully awake, and a coffee they had or did not have, and a conversation they had yesterday that they are still turning over, and a plan for tonight, and a worry about someone they love, and a memory that arrived unexpectedly this morning on the way to wherever they are going and that they are still not sure what to do with. They are as complicated as you are. As full of contradiction and hope and disappointment and small daily joy as any human being you have ever known. They are living their life in a place that has asked a great deal of the people who live in it and whose people have kept showing up anyway, kept choosing the ordinary, kept insisting on the small daily things that make life worth living, even when larger things were making that insistence difficult. That is Moscow. That is Russia. That is the country that the news does not show you and the movies do not capture and the political speeches do not describe. 12 million individual human beings on streets exactly like this one doing their best. I will be back here next week. There is always more to show you. Subscribe if you want to keep seeing it and leave me a comment below. Tell me what you thought you knew about Russia before this video that you see differently now. I read every single one.